had Carol Agengo lead from HelpAge International lead this particular session. And the panelists were Lawrence Mongai Munywa, who's the chairperson for the Elderly Society of Kenya. And just a quick overview is that the conversation focused on the challenges and potential solutions with regard to the mobility of elderly when using public transport. Some of the key points that came out were that the elderly face a lot of ageism, which is the stereotyping, prejudicial, discrimination based on age. Now, the second key point that came through was that the privatization of the public transport sector as a streamline to services, standardize the charges, will bring sanity to the sector. The third key point was that there should be a policy on public transport that the elderly are invited to contribute to so that their needs can be heard. The other key point, the fourth key point, was that input from the audience, that is the 880 rule. If you plan the transport system for an 8-year-old and an 8-year-old, then it will be conducive for all. Allow me to repeat that again. If you plant the transportation system for an 8-year-old and an 80-year-old, then it will be conducive for all. We also had another session, and this was women as professionals. We had 48 attendees from the online audience. And this session was led by Anna Karume, who is the International Transport Workers Federation representative. And with her, she had 3 panelists. We had Naomi Njeri, who was a conductor and a women rep of Umoina Sacco. We had Lucia Muroto, a conductor, and Bomasa Ongata Line Saccos, and Edina Mora, a conductor and also a member of the Kani Sacco. The overview for this women as professionals was that the panelists shared their personal stories and challenges that they experienced as professionals in the Kenya public transport system. Some of the key points that were raised yesterday is that as much as the industry is changing and is becoming more accommodative of women, they still face a lot of harassment and disrespect and judgment from the fellow elderly women. Second key point was that women participated in the industry as professionals are building themselves up economically and are able to provide for their families, even educate their children to university level. Something else that came up is that more women need to get into leadership roles within the sector so that they can voice their needs. Another point is that SACCOs should start to offer contracts to their workers so that they can retire. So that when they retire, they have something saved away. Matatu managed or driven by women are cleaner, more organized compared to those ran by men. You feel safer in a matatu being driven by a woman. That was one of the participants that had joined the conversation. Now we move on to the third session of yesterday, and that was persons with disability and mobility. Quite an informative session that we had yesterday. And this was led by Violetta Siko, who's the program officer for Flown Initiative. She was assisted by several panelists, including Alan Herbert of All Concept and Black Albinism Foundation, Angeline Mukuche, the founder and chairperson of Leadership Empowerment on Disability Initiative, Joseph Atela, the executive director of Disabled Empowerment on Society of Kenya, and Ivan Omondi, chairperson of Mobility Community-Based Organization in Kajiado County. So the overview for this particular session was that the panelists shared their personal stories of what their experiences have been using the public transport system as persons with disabilities. Now, the key points from this session were that the Kenya Persons with Disability Act establishes that they are entitled to a barrier-free and disability-friendly environment to enable them to access social amenities and other equipment to promote their mobility. However, the implementation of the Act is wanting. The second key point to this was that the various organizations within government that deal with matters pertaining to persons with disabilities, however, their mandates are not clear. The third point was that the persons with disabilities are consulted in everything that the government does. However, their opinions are not considered when it comes to drafting the policies. And another point that came across is that the persons with disabilities are not asking to be given designated areas. They are lobbying for inclusion. For example, wider sidewalks that are covered, wider sidewalks that are accessible to somebody using a wheelchair. We had a fourth session. This is children and their caregivers. We had an online audience of 50 attendees for this session. And this session was led by Nina Ndegwa, the founder of Wow Mom Kenya. The panelists that spoke in this session were Rashda Majid, the country representative, India, Bernard Van Lee Foundation, Anna Siprikova, the Senior Program Associate, NACTO, and Anna Kamau, researcher at the Institute of Development Studies, University of Nairobi. And just a brief overview of what this session entails is that the session was focused on how to make cities more child-friendly. The panelists presented various research topics and resulting statistics and reports. So some of the key points that came out from this session is that, one, globally, 500 children die every day from road traffic accidents that are totally preventable. The second point is that cities should be designed from an elevation of 95 centimeters, the height of a 3-year-old, to make them inclusive. Currently, a lot of cities are designed for able-bodied men, disregarding children and their caregivers as well as the elderly. Cities that work for children work for all. That was a very important point that came yesterday. Now, another key point in this session was that it is imperative that we think about redesigning public spaces and transport systems with children in mind. It's not a matter of space, but a question of priority. Then we had another session, and this was a special focus on adolescents and young adults. We had an online audience of 41 attendees in this session. The session being led by Sheila Watson, the Deputy Director, FIA Foundation. This session, Sheila presented various research results around how adolescents and young adults' mobility and transit systems are affected. And the key points to take home from this were that 1.2 million adolescents die every year with road traffic injuries as a leading cause of death. Now, second key point is that cities need to exist for the benefit of the people rather than be vehicle focused. Allow me to say that again. Cities need to exist for the benefit of the people rather than be vehicle focused. The third key point in this was that with safety streets, more people are willing to walk, which results in less people using vehicles to get around, so less emissions and cleaner air and ultimately healthier people. Now, without further ado, that was what we went through yesterday. Allow me to just remind us some of the little housekeeping items that we have. So we're going to have plenary discussions and presentations from our fantastic selection of panelists, and you can find more details of the program on our website, which is www.womenandtransportafrica.org. That is www.womenandtransportafrica.org. We know that many of you will join in today and tomorrow's proceedings. For those who have already registered, we'll provide you with more information about the same tomorrow. We encourage you to tweet us at hashtag 2020 WTA conference. That is hashtag 2020 WTA conference. If you have any questions throughout the next today and tomorrow, kindly feel free to ask for assistance, ask them on our chat streams. We're also going to have a poll, like I mentioned earlier, during the whole course of this conference and even after when we close the webinar, and it will be a pleasure to have you stay with us, give us your feedback, and kindly fill in those forms as the questionnaires come in. It will be very, very important for us to get that information back. Follow us on our social media pages. This is Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Our name is @Flown Initiative. Now, lastly, I will kindly remind you to mute your devices, and this is to help us hear the persons talking. Now, without any further ado, allow me to move on to the next, to start off our program for today. And we're starting off with the state-of-art research on gender and transport across Africa. This session is going to be led by Jeff Turner, who's a high-volume transport applied research program. Jeff Turner is from High Volume Transport Applied Research Program. So take it away, Jeff.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this session on the state of the art on research and on gender and transport in Africa. Welcome to this session, and welcome to the day of research focus within the Women and Transport Africa conference. And it's I'm really looking forward to a very interesting, exciting day of research. I hope you can all agree is fundamental. It's a key part of our efforts and our drives to be able to deliver equitable gender equitable and inclusive transport systems across Africa. The research will help understand the differences between how men and women travel, how they use the transport systems. It will help us understand the differences between the impact of the inequitable and exclusive transport systems that we currently encounter, and the scale of that challenge, and the why the why the impacts are the way they are. And we will also be able to understand what steps can be taken to deliver a gender equitable and inclusive transport system, and what works on those steps along the way. Gender and transport research has been a growing area of research over a number of decades, but because it's socially specific and contextual specific, the globally sort of accepted research doesn't necessarily describe the nature of the gender and transport interaction at in individual countries, in individual contexts, by geography, by income group, and by a whole range of other factors. So there is a need for a considerably greater degree of gender and transport research, and that's certainly the case in an African context, where one of the significant gaps, we have quite a good history of gender and transport in the rural sector, but there are significant gaps around urban transport, around major infrastructure and major regional and transnational flows, and a whole host of other areas as well. And so there's a need for more of it. And so I'm really pleased this morning to be able to chair a session of a whole series of projects that are part of a substantial investment by the UK aid, UK government, in transport research. And this morning we will hear from a number of projects within that investment that are focusing on a range of gender and transport issues, covering areas of under-researched knowledge that will make a contribution, including areas focused on urban transport, focusing on sexual harassment of women using public transport, and focusing on human trafficking, its links to gender equity and its connections to transnational and long distance corridor. We will be hearing firstly from Dr. Bernard Abika, who is the team leader for the high volume transport applied research programme funded by UK aid, which is the funding programme that I've been talking about, that bring some of these projects we're going to hear about from this morning. I myself, and I didn't introduce myself at the beginning, and apologies for that, my name is Jeff Turner. I'm a technical advisor to the High Volume Transport Project, but I am also a gender and transport researcher and specialist of a number of years. And then we will hear from Ava Mwai from North Star, who is involved in a project investigating the impact on social inclusion of the HVT corridors, high volume transport corridors, and solutions to identifying and preventing human trafficking. Paul Curtis will hear from next from Vectos, describing a project that I'm involved in fact, called Empower, which is developing tools for identifying and tackling sexual harassment on public transport. And then we will hear from Alem Areya from Alert Engineering in Ethiopia on women's personal safety, participation and employment linkages in urban public transport in Ethiopia. And so without further ado, I think I'd like to ask Bernard to introduce the HVT program itself, and then we will then go through the presentations. Please remember to put any questions for our discussion later on in the chat box, and there will be plenty of time to do that as we go. And so, yep, I'd like to call Bernard to come and give us the introduction.
Hello, my name is Bernard Obika. I lead the High Volume Transport Applied Research Program, or High Volume Transport as it is more commonly known. We are delighted to be supporting the Flown Initiative in hosting this important conference for the second year running. The High Volume Transport Program is a 5-year research program funded by UK aid through the Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office. The program aims to gather evidence to improve transportation systems in low-income countries of Africa and Asia towards transport that is green, affordable, safe, and inclusive. During part 1, we undertook extensive review of the state of knowledge, and this resulted in extensive publications across 4 transport themes: long-distance transport, urban transport, low-carbon transport, gender and inclusion. In part 2, we are focused on 6 priority topics within the overall theme of climate change and inclusion, cutting across long-distance transport and urban transport. The priority topics are policy and regulation, innovation and technology, data and decision support systems, research uptake and capacity building. We're also working in fragile and conflict-afflicted states. Gender, inclusion, and safety cuts across all of these priority topics. We're currently funding over 30 research projects at universities, consulting organizations, and transport research organizations, in addition to supporting capacity building and uptake activities such as the current session. I flag up just 3 of these projects which you will hear about during this conference. These are the Empower project by Vectors, which aims to tackle sexual harassment in urban transport in African cities, the prevention of human trafficking along Africa's high-volume transport corridors by CADNO, and finally, the Women Personal Safety and Participation in Urban Transport in Ethiopia. Please join our network to get more information, participate in various research competitions, and contribute to our knowledge of the transport systems in Africa. Thank you very much for listening, and I wish you all a very fruitful session.
Thank you, Bernard, for that excellent introduction to the programme. And so now I'd like to call Ava to describe one of the series of projects that are happening within the HVT programme. Ava, if you could start and describe your project.
Thank you very much. The research project that I'm sharing about is impact on social inclusion of HVT corridors and potential solutions to identifying and preventing human trafficking. And the partners, IMC being the lead in Kano, then we have North Star Alliance where I work, and Scriptoria, and the research is funded by UK aid. The presentation outline is like this: background, research objectives and timelines, literature review, primary research plans, GESI implications, and the next steps. So that I will be able to share, starting with the research objectives. The first objective of this research is to investigate the role played by HVT corridors in human trafficking. We're focusing on 2 countries in East Africa, Tanzania and Uganda. The second research objective is to explore some of the factors which are transport related and regulatory that are contributing to human trafficking along high volume transport corridors in these two countries. And then the third one is to assess the level of awareness of human trafficking and its impacts among transport providers, the users of HBT corridors and the communities through which these routes pass. The last one is to identify and pilot innovations that can help identify and counter human trafficking along HBT corridors. And the applications, as you can see on the right side, is strengthening national human trafficking prevention strategies through greater policy attention to role of transport and transport sector actors in combating human trafficking, and of course application to other sub-Saharan Africa countries facing human trafficking challenges. That is focusing on scalability. The phases and timeline. July and September, we've been working on the Inception, and an Inception report was prepared and shared. Then from October to December 2020, we are preparing for the research. January to July is the primary research phase. Then August to January 2022, we have the pilot intervention. And then the February to April, we have phase 5, which is uptake and embedment. Then we are looking at the progress. There's a picture there showing the kind of environment that the research is focusing on. Then one of the key activities that we engaged in right from the very beginning is stakeholder mapping. When you talk about social inclusion, it's very key to identify which stakeholders are there and how you're going to engage with each one of them. So we looked at stakeholder mapping in each of the countries. First Tanzania and then Uganda. And I would be quick to mention that this is a process that is still ongoing because other partners, we have taken a little long to identify everybody. And so it is something that is continuing. When you look at the government stakeholders, I won't mention all of them. I'll just mention some. We have the Anti-Human Trafficking Secretariat in Tanzania, which we are still pursuing and talking to. Then there's the Land Transport Regulatory Authority, the Ministry of Health with a very long name there in Tanzania, Home Affairs, the Anti-Human Trafficking Secretariat is actually a part of the Home Affairs. Then we have Industry and Trade, Ministry of Works, and some training centers. We are also working with the police force and the Prime Minister's office, the Roads Agency in Tanzania. When we look at the intergovernmental stakeholders, we have the EAC, or East Africa Community, Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, International Labour Organization, Labour Organization, and then we have International Organization for Migration. We have also outlined, listed World Bank, UNICEF, UN, ODC, UN Women, and WHO. As you can see, all these are instrumental and have important information that will help the research advance and produce the desired results. Then when it comes to CSOs and NGOs, we in Tanzania have looked at African Network for the Prevention and Protection of Child Abuse and Neglect. This is an organization that would really have a lot of information on children who are abused and neglected. Then we have Ahmed. We have Courage House, one of the key CSOs in Tanzania. And then we have Daughters of Mary Immaculate, Kiwohede, it's a Kiswahili name. And then we have Love Justice, which is also doing a lot in TIP. And then we have Tesdi Homes. I hope I'm pronouncing it well. And this is because it also deals with children who are vulnerable and many times trafficked. Then the transport sector, of course, this is where we are focusing on the research. So it was very key to look at a number of transport stakeholders. And here we looked at Arusha Technical Training College, Central Corridor Transport, Transit and Transport Facilitation Agency, CILT in Tanzania, Communication and Transport Workers Union, Future World Driving School, National Institute of Transport, Tanzania Truckers Owners, Freight Forwarders Association, and Drivers Associations. And we are also looking at the Bus Owners Association and Trademark East Africa. Then the private sector, mainly we have in Tanzania only been able to get in touch and talk to Impala Logistics. These were very key when it comes to transport logistics. Puma Energy and Scania, Tanzania. Then on the side of Uganda, you can see we invested quite a great deal in stakeholder mapping and really contacting and talking to them virtually and where possible face-to-face. The government sector in Uganda, where our contact focused was Iganga Municipality, Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development, Ministry of Health, Internal Affairs, Trade, Industry and Cooperatives, Ministry of Works and Transport, NEPAC local government, Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, the President Office, also Soroti, Local Government and Transport Licensing Board, and then of course the Uganda Police. Then when it comes to intergovernmental organizations, we had Africa Development Bank, Agence Française de Development. I'm sorry, I'm not French speaking. EAC again, then the EU delegation or European Union delegation, Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, International Labour Organization, just like in Tanzania, IOM again, just like in Tanzania, UNICEF, Uganda, UN Women, WHO, and the World Bank. Important also are CSOs and NGOs. We have in Uganda, AfriChild, ANPP, CAN, that was the African Network for Prevention and Protection of Child Abuse and Neglect. Civil society in transport in Uganda, Counter Human Trafficking Trust East Africa, dwelling places. Here we really went deep and got quite a number of them. Dwelling places, Love Justice International. This is another one that you might realize was also mentioned in Tanzania. Make a Child Smile, Platform for Labor Action, Rehab Uganda, Retract Uganda, Set Her Free, Somero, Tesdi Home again, Ugandan Association of Women Lawyers, Uganda Child Rights Network, Uganda Coalition of Civil Societies Against Trafficking in Persons, and Willow International Uganda. Then looking at the transport stakeholders, a number of them as well, Amalgamated Transport and General Workers of Uganda. This one is an association for truck drivers, Automobile Association of Uganda, Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport in Uganda, Graben Logistics Academy, National Logistics Platform, Regional Lorry Drivers and Transporters Association, again Transport Trademark East Africa in Uganda, Uganda Freight Forwarders Association, Uganda Bus Drivers and Allied Association, and Uganda Professional Drivers Network. Then we have a number of private sector actors, Bamiko Bolore, CNOOC Uganda, Grabin 4PL, Mark Investments, Mukasa Couriers, RL Investments, and CO Energy Services, and Somero Total, and then Vivo Energy. I'm sorry, I have felt that the need to really mention them so that you can see the efforts that we put in stakeholder mapping, because we all need this. We need these people. And then the three elements of human trafficking that we are looking at is act, means, and purpose. On the act side, we have recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, receipt of persons. Then when it comes to the means, we have threat or use of force, other forms of coercion, abduction, fraud, deception, abuse of power, abuse of a position of vulnerability, giving or receiving of payments or benefits to achieve the consent of the person having control of another person. And looking at the purpose, we have exploitation or prostitution of others, sexual exploitation, labor exploitation, slavery, or other slavery like situation, include also organ removal and others. Then on the context or scale, we have in Uganda, 2019, we have 455 victims as recorded by Uganda Police. And then in 2018, 304,000 victims. And this is mainly sourced from Walk Free Foundation. On the other hand, in Tanzania, we have in 2019 recorded 161 victims by the government of Tanzania. And then in 2018, 336,000 victims, again, from Walk Free Foundation. And then the context in terms of types, we have in Uganda mainly domestic servitude, forced marriage, trafficking for war, like the El Shabab, street begging. And when you look at in Tanzania, there's two that are cutting across, organ removal, and then we have child sex trafficking. In Tanzania, we also have agricultural, labor, mining, construction, and sex trafficking. So quite a bit of similarity between the two country context. And then when we look at the roots in terms of context, we have in Uganda, the source being transnational, domestic, especially from Busoga in eastern Karamoja, in northeastern refugee camps in Uganda. And then we have DRC, Rwanda, Kenya, Tanzania, Burundi. Of course, these countries have a lot to do in common, and the borders, there's a lot of cross-border movement. And then South Sudan, South Asia. Then the destination will mainly be Middle East, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Oman, Qatar, Kuwait, Iran, Jordan, Egypt, Turkey, Malaysia, Thailand, India, and China. The other destinations will be Kenya, Somalia, and Sudan. Uganda, we have cities, yes, and other destinations, of course, Uganda. Transit routes, we have Horn of Africa in some instances, and Libya, Kenya, Uganda. Then we have Tanzania, where also transnational routes really come into play. Tanzania domestic, and like the slide for Uganda, we also have Burundi, Kenya, Uganda, Malawi, China, India, Nepal. If you look at the transport corridors in Tanzania, there's a lot of movement towards the southern African region. And then we have Horn of Africa, Rwanda, and Burundi. The destinations would be South Africa, Middle East, Kenya, Uganda, and of course Tanzania, Dodoma, Arusha, Kilimanjaro, and Zanzibar. And then transit routes. Sorry, I also need to mention South Africa, Mozambique, and Europe. Then for the routes, we have Malawi, Mozambique, the miscellaneous. When we looked at research gaps, we have a role of transporters as traffickers. Those are some of the gaps, extent to which drivers and other transport staff are acting independently, understanding of the transport sector actors in human trafficking legislation, extent to which and how COVID-19 is affected human trafficking. We thought this was important because of the pandemic season, victims, survivors' experience in the transit stage, perspectives on how to operationalize transport related provisions, potential role of transport association and driving schools in combating human trafficking and opportunities yes. Then we have research topics. I need to move faster. Awareness of human trafficking, forms, push and pull factors, scale, routes and impact, understanding of role of transport sector actors in human trafficking, involvement of self or others in human trafficking, focusing on role, motivation, benefits and risks, impact of COVID-19, mentioned again, knowledge of human trafficking registration and transport-related provisions, and ideas about potential role of transport sector in combating human trafficking. The locations are Uganda, Tanzania, and the specific locations are in Uganda, Busia and Malaba, and the borders between Kenya and Uganda. Then in Tanzania, we are looking at Arusha and Tunduma, and the borders of Zambia and Kenya. Overview very quickly, we have a cross-sectional research study, quantitative side of it, drivers, truck and bus, coach and taxis, including conductors and turnboys, communities at truck stops and cross-border checkpoints. The key informant interviews will focus on transport police, border officials, transport associations, driving training schools, victims and survivors, and also civil society organizations. On the cross-sectional research quantitative, we have 1536 respondents, and on the key formats, 55 respondents. Why the research is important? Important to say is human trafficking is not routinely portrayed as negative externality of transport corridor development. Budgets are not allocated at national or international level. Opportunities to intervene are almost always missed, and human trafficking occurs at intersection of poverty, gender disadvantage, and social inclusion. And why the research, again, the type of trafficking is gender distinct. there's forced sexual exploitation, and mainly trafficking victims. Women 49% according to literature, and girls 23%. So the gender perspective is really something to look at. So when you look at systematic gender discrimination, this leaves women and girls vulnerable, and adult male victims also tend to be overlooked. Then why we are looking at drivers and associated staff, I think we have already mentioned about that, but I want to say that gender disaggregated data on nature, scale, awareness of human trafficking along human HVT corridors is lacking, and transport sector interventions need to be gender sensitive if they have to have any impact. So thank you for listening to the many slides, and I wish you well. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Nice to be here, and really looking forward to presenting our project called Empower, which is part of the HVT program. My name's Paul Curtis. I work for Vectos, and I'm the team leader of this project. So the main objective of our project is really to build capacity of transport professionals to deliver a gender equitable and inclusive transport, public transport in particular, and tackling sexual harassment of women and girls. And our main output really is what we call a decision-making tool, a web-based tool, which will be free to use for transport professionals around Africa. So the research questions in particular, which we'll be tackling things like which tools are needed to enhance women's personal safety on public transport, but also how to incorporate the voice of disadvantaged groups within transport planning and decision making. So this is our lovely consortium of partners. We have a great consortium of partners from Africa and from Europe. You can see them listed there. And then at the bottom, you'll see our research cities. So this is where our research is taking place in the field, in Lagos and Blantyre and Abuja and Kigali. But we very much hope that the results are transferable to cities from lots of other low-income countries in Africa, and we have an approach to maximize that opportunity, which I will tell you about. So our target audience really are city authorities and transport operators. So really those responsible for delivering public transport services. But also, on the other hand, international organizations and NGOs. We really want to be able to communicate the outputs of this research and the tool during the project. And just to flag that the project started a few months ago. It's a 2-year project, and our field work will start in the spring next year. So we're in the process currently of setting up our data collection methodology. In terms of the use for this research, we would like policymakers, decision takers in low-income cities to apply it to help them implement new policies and measures which identify and tackle the causes of sexual harassment. And we will have an opportunity to respond to the challenges that COVID has thrown our way. For example, we'll be able to test how different ways to deliver surveys. So for example, paper-based or remote, online or technology-based surveys, the effectiveness of those different survey approaches. And that will tell us whether we can still collect data during periods where there may be restrictions of movement on the ground. So let's look at our research cities once again. So Lagos and Blantyre. So in the spring next year, we'll be delivering a mixture of different survey types, technology-based, paper-based, So when we say technology, this could be surveys which are delivered by a mobile phone app, by a tablet, face-to-face, or indeed online surveys. We'll be also testing paper-based surveys, and we'll be delivering focus groups to discuss the findings. And then in Abuja and Kigali, we'll be hosting a number of workshops. The first one will be the behavior change model workshop. And this is interesting. We'll be using a model which we've developed in, which has been developed in a European project. And we want to be able to try and model what the impact would be on travel behavior, particularly of female public transport users, what their travel behavior impact would be from introducing new types of policies and measures which are designed to improve the experience on board and to tackle sexual harassment on board. So we have an interesting piece of work around that, but we'll also be hosting workshops to discuss the findings from Lagos and Blantyre, because we want to transfer the findings to other cities. Now, of course, we're really interested in learning the results from the data and to better understand the current challenges regarding sexual harassment on public transport in our cities here. But in Power, where we are innovating, we believe, is that we are really looking into the process of data collection and the different ways to collect data. So we will be testing the effectiveness of using a paper-based survey compared with a technology-based survey in terms of which survey gives us the most insightful data, which approach allows the respondents, the participants, to give us the most rich data and their current experiences. We want to find out, how do we get the best evidence from which new strategies, new measures can be justified? So it's about getting the best evidence. So paper-based versus technology-based surveys we're going to be testing. We'll be testing face-to-face interviews versus remote surveys. And really interestingly, we're going to be using a different phrasing within a similar question. So how can you use the phrasing in a question, again, to elicit the most insightful responses, to build that really strong evidence base? And we'll also be able to determine, in terms of what resource needs, what kind of resourcing is needed to deliver different types of survey. So that will be interesting as well in terms of costing. So we're interested in the data, but this is also really about the process, and everything that we learn will be fed into our decision-making tool. So it will be a web-based tool, free to access, and really it's going to be designed as a step-by-step guide on the process of identifying the problem of sexual harassment, building the evidence, and then the user will be advised on which measures, which policies might be the most suitable to tackle the challenges that have been identified. So this is an initial visualization of the tool. It's going to be really based around the user. So we can really see it assisting policymakers, transport providers to develop a really solid evidence-based approach to addressing sexual harassment within public transport. It will be composed of various models. And for instance, if I was working in a public transport authority in a city in Africa, and I'm aware that sexual harassment is a problem, but I don't really have the evidence yet. I don't have decent data that I can go to my board with and say, look, here's a problem. We need to change the strategy. We need to do something about it. So the first step in this tool will be to advise me, the transport professional, about how do I go about collecting that evidence. And what we're testing in our data collection within this project is lots of different ways of collecting that data. So in step one of the tool, there will be resources for the user and guidance on which surveys should they think about delivering, to whom they should deliver it, and a mixture of technology-based or paper-based. Should they do face-to-face or online? How much would it cost to deliver that? And what sort of questions should you be asking? And of course, importantly, how do you make sure that you deliver the research according to ethical principles? So that would be the first module of the tool. And then step two would be, we would have examples of how to set a vision and a strategy for tackling the challenges identified by the data, and so on and so forth. So it would be a step-by-step approach of identifying the problem, getting the evidence, winning the support of the decision takers in the organization, and then allowing that organization to roll out the best suited measures, be it at the management level, changes to management, making sure we have better equal opportunities, maybe in the delivery level and the operations level of the public transport services. So that's the idea. And during the course of this project, we'll be building this tool, and we really want and have the opportunity for partners outside of this project to really contribute, and that will be some of the added value. So in terms of stakeholder engagement, we will be testing and validating this tool with our own partners, but we'll be looking for expertise outside the project also to make sure it's the most transferable to other cities and scalable. We'll be building capacity, particularly with those transport professionals during the tool design process. We'll be doing a lot of communications activities to promote the tool. And towards the end of the project, in terms of evaluation, we want to be able to show that policymakers and decision takers have contributed to the tool's development, they've validated it, and that they have started to use the tool themselves. So we really want you all to get involved, and we're setting up a project reference group. We will be inviting cities, transport operators, NGOs, lots of different organizations to the group with different expertise. We'll be working closely with the HVT projects that we are close to in the gender field. And there'll be an opportunity for cities and other organizations to test and validate our tool, to participate in our validation workshops. These may be in person, they may have to be online. That might make it easier for more people to participate. And we also hope that you would like to communicate the tool to your stakeholders to really build up a level of interest as we move on. So that would be slightly later in the project when the tool has started its first phase. But in the meantime, if you are interested to learn more, we'd be really happy to hear from you. The project director is Professor Pickup, and again, I'm the team leader, so please drop us a line if you'd like to hear more information. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Paul. That's a really important point of needing the tools, the methods, the approaches to allow everybody within the transport sector to gather evidence, and to gather evidence in this particularly important and under researched area around sexual harassment on public transport. But also the important point you make that these are all of the projects we're hearing about this morning are opportunities for all of the audience to get involved and interact with the researchers, and ultimately, it's about sharing knowledge and sharing the involvement and expertise. So thanks very much for that. And I'd like to call on, and just one reminder as we're going through, please put questions for our later discussion in the chat box. Think of your questions and we'll have plenty of opportunity to discuss later on. I'd like to call Alem Araya, please, then to give your presentation on your project focusing on, particularly on Ethiopia. Alan, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jeff, and thank you, organizers. I would like to start with the appreciation that I got the opportunity to present our projects on this women and transport in Africa. And thank you very much, organizers. So the topic I'm going to present is research on transport issues in Africa. Our research project, which is organized by High Volume Transports, which we are working with High Volume Transports in applied research, is a research focusing on inclusive transports, and particularly on women's personal safety and participation in employment linkage, participation in planning and decision making in urban public transports in Mekelle, in the city of Mekelle in Ethiopia. And this research project is mainly conducted by Alert Engineering, a consulting company on road and transports, along with HVT, IMC Worldwide, which is also funded by UK Aid, and partner organizations in Mekelle City, the Mekelle University, and the Mekelle City Administration. Well, as per the presentation slide, I put just a background information on myself. My name is Alamgana Araya. I'm Managing Director of Alert Engineering Consultants. I'm also the project director for this research project, HVT research project in inclusive transport on movement, safety, and security. And with I have a transport background. I'm civil engineer with road and transport specialization. I work also in some academia. And my presentation will focus the outline. I'll give just a brief background on introduction of the project and the objective of the research and the research methodology. And as the research is just starting, not results, but we can present the expected outcomes and the benefits, why we do this research, and the plan of activities in way forward. I already mentioned the research project focuses on how our transport system in many of our list income countries or developing countries is inclusive or considerate for women's need. So we'll focus on women's personal safety and how those transport sector, especially the urban public transports, how much women are participating in terms of planning, in terms of decision making and management, and as well as an opportunity for economic empowerment for women. And we develop already a logo for our project, and the project is for about 14 months duration. We start last August, and we're expecting to have some results on September next year. And I already mentioned the presenters or the project is coordinated by us, Alert Engineering, in collaboration with the University of Mekelle and the City Administration of Mekelle. And the research is focusing mainly the logistics and data collection focus on the city of Mekelle, but which is a common issue for many similar countries and cities. Just to give a brief background, as many of you have already mentioned in your presentations, and several researchers or literatures indicate that transport is not gender neutral, that there is evidence from empirical research that women work more and make short trips, rely on public transports comparing to the other rates, women's travel patterns are mainly influenced by their traditional role, which is influenced by as a primary caregivers of households and restriction of mobilities. All those have their own needs. And in many least economic low-income countries, urban transports may prove to be unsafe for some disadvantaged groups, including women and vulnerable groups. And this adversely affects women as affected by the public transport's character or suitability. So the main aim of this project or this research is to assess or examine how the urban public transports in the cities, whether it's gender inclusive. And it identifies 4 research objectives. One from the, in terms of women's safety and security in those urban transports. And the other is how this urban transports considers the woman's voice. So we investigate how much they are participating, their participation. And we'll try to examine also the link between the urban transports and the job creation for women, and the existing policy frameworks, the existing strategies and regulations, how much those transport systems are inclusive for women. So we try to address 4 research questions, which corresponds to the, which brought these research objectives. How does the urban public transport affect women's personal safety and security in their day-to-day activities? And how can the voice of women can be incorporated within the transport planning, within the transport development and the decision making? And what are the links between this urban transport and job creation for women? And we'll try to address and answer what policies, strategies, and tools are available or needed in order to enhance women's inclusiveness in the urban public transports. So there are some research assumptions that we start is the pattern or the need of access and use of transports are deeply gendered. The transport's need for women in many of in our cities, as you can see from the pictures, that this lady is looking her destination per day at different location of her day or activities that children sending to school and or joining the her work office and some social activities and or shopping and marketing in a very regular pattern. So with this assumption, our transports considerate or considering those her needs. Women travel patterns is different from men, as I already mentioned it in the background. Their shorts, most frequent, involve care and laborers carrying some goods, people or kids. So no gender parity in decision making. You will find in very few women in management and in so on. Women are not homogeneous groups, so the different status and ages and ability and needs, or these transgenders will look for different travel pattern or transport requirements. So, and this urban public transport is pretty unsafe or secure in terms of different harassments, social harassments, and in terms of elderly women and others, their capacity to use and to share those public transports. So what do we look forward in as a major outcome from this research is we will try to identify what are the major gaps at the moment. So in relation to women's safety and security in the urban public transports, well, the dominant urban public transports, as many similar cities or public transport in cities in Mekelle, which is the second city. It's not as metropolitan like in Addis Ababa, or but as a second city in the northern part of Ethiopia. The major transport is the small minibuses, which we call them in many of East African countries the matatu, and the three-wheel rickshaw, or we call them bajaj. These are the two dominant public transports, even though there are some big buses, very few patterns or number of buses and lines of buses. So we will focus our investigation and assessment on all those public transports, but with the dominant the matatus and the bajajs. So as an outcome, we'll generate information for obviously future planning, future policy, future regulation, how we can make an inclusive or develop an inclusive approach in our transport system. Then we will outline the way forward where women would have equitable access, some advices, recommendations as an output in the from this research for safety point of view, from participation point of view, from economic empowerment or job creation in the transport sector. And as we try to provide inputs towards an adaptation, how to adapt to the local context, to the local needs, and to the local working system, and amendments or designs of an inclusive policy transport. Who will benefit? Or we have already many stakeholder planning or mapping we have done, but as a direct or indirect users of this research output can be women using the transport service, particularly in the city, but in many similar cities or in low economic countries, and those women, female students, working women, housekeepers, elderly women, by assessing their needs and identifying their needs. Women working in the transport project itself, in the bureaus, offices, and projects. So as part of this transport development, transport system, those engineers, supervisors, contractors, and administrative staffs, how they consider the participation of women. And service provider women, in the Women Taxi Association, or there are very few drivers, so we'll identify what's their limitation, why they are very few, and what's their special needs, in order to use this as an opportunity, as a job opportunity, as a career, as part of the service operators. And indirectly, there are many government, non-government organizations that they can be benefits or as a recipient from this research, like the city administration, in order to provide the transport system, proper transport to the city dwellers, and the transport office, the city transport office, the women's affairs office, which try to address the needs or the gender gap in those sectors. There are Transport Women's Affairs Bureau, the Police Commission, the Bureau of Labor and Social Affairs, the Bureau of Justice and local courts, even the Minister of Transport at national level, and the Bureau of Construction, Road and Transports at regional level. We expect will be the output of this research will benefit them. And private organizations or associations like the Taxi Association or the Public Transport Associations, Bajaj Associations, even some of the educational and research institutes like the Mekelle and other universities can benefit from this research. So what will be the impact and the use, how we can see it, who will be the user of this information? Of course, through engagements during the study or the research, as well as an output, women in different age groups and status, the civil servants, business women, housewives, students, transport planners, policymakers will be in the users of this, which will have an impact. And what change do we expect to see as an output of this research? Well, to see the urban public transports sector of the city gender sensitive and inclusive enough in future transport planning or transport service provision, that women's special interests and needs are adequately considered during the service, during the planning and decision making, as well as the employment. So the ideal use of for this research is mainly it's not only that the users are not their needs are not considered. We've seen in some of our preliminary assessments and discussions, even the awareness is not well enough. What are the hindrances for the women need on the public transports? So the awareness and dissemination as this inclusive transport concept will be a benefit or an ideal use for many of this. And change on policy will be the major outputs, or change on implementation and strategies and regulations of this public transport usage will be the major output for and setting a framework towards this inclusive transport services and infrastructures. What's the planned methodology, or what we are carrying out at the moment in order to carry out this research? How does this research be conducted? Well, as in relation to the objective we set, we'll conduct the research mainly through data collection, investigation, assessment on the existing condition of women's in relation to women's safety and security, in relation to the participation, how much they are participating, what's their role of participating, how their voice is considered in different ladders of the transport sector in planning and decision making, and the role of these transports or the public transports in terms of providing employment opportunity for women. And in relation to policy framework in public, will assess and investigate those in the city of Mekelle and scale up to similar cities. What are the data collection methods? And there are literature survey we have already carrying out, and we start also the data collection through direct engagement. Mainly, we developed a questionnaire that try to address those 4 basic objectives or major objectives as a quantitative data, and in addition to the questionnaire and direct data measurements, we are carrying out also a focus group, a selective focus group discussion, a key informant interview, and an in-depth interview with those different stakeholders. And we'll try to provide and as an evidence or generate at the end technical reports to our partners, to HVT, but also various paper publications or dissemination as mechanism of dissemination in journal articles, and policy brief to the regional authorities, to the ministry, and concept notes, leaflets, brochures, medias as a mechanism of dissemination and communication and awareness. As I already mentioned, the methodology, data collection, and engagement. Most of our data enumerators we selectively choose also which will be our future stakeholders or highly related to this transport sector. So we are carrying out the survey through questionnaire. We are carrying out the desk review in many of our stakeholders in the region, in the nation, and the focus group discussion, in-depth and key informats interviews, even the ethnographic, that's the participants' observation, how those public transport users are facing in their day-to-day through observation, are the major mechanism of our data collection. when we see stakeholders, what type of data we're collecting, or the secondary data and communications and so on. Some of the major stakeholders in the region, in the country is mentioned, but we can list them in a group of local, regional, and international. The Mekelle City Administration, Mekelle Transport Office, the Regional Women's Standing Committee, the Women's League, the Mekelle Traffic Office, or the Tigray Association of Veterans, and with mainly women and disabled women are there. Representative persons with visual and disability, Association for Women and with Disability, Police Commission in community policies, the university, taxi association, and those transport associations, and the regional policy studies are our stakeholders, and some of the major stakeholders for the research. And we already start engaging them from our planning, starting from the planning as engagement, so that they can develop also a sense of workshop. We start our data enumerators training. We can see it in the top picture, early September. Most of them are from the transport sector, transport professionals, and data for data collection. But also we carried out at the very beginning, just after starting our inception, we conduct also stakeholders consultation workshop in the mid of September or third week of September. The bottom picture indicates that we engage from those major stakeholders as a workshop, and so that those can engage at the beginning of the research, not only to inform them at the end, but also to carry with us as a partners, or to bring with us as a partners of the research, so they can actively participate in identifying the issues that we identify, and as part of solutions, or to give us even guidance and directions in relation to their need and demand, so that they can actively participate in these consultation workshops, in those focus group discussions and interviews, and provide advisory services to meet the primary objective. And where are we now? Our activities that we are carrying out so far. This is just the project plan with major 6 activities, or we can say we have 5 phases or milestones. At the moment, we already develop and set and submit the Inception reports. We submit the Inception report with some method revision and literature review. But also we carried out some of the activity too, like the consultation workshop. We have carrying out the questionnaire and field data collection. About 700 data points is targeted, and we have already collected those the primary data, the quantitative data. And now we are carrying out the interview, the focus group discussion, the ethnographic observation. We are carrying out. And we are on the preparation of to submit the second milestone, which is the raw data collection, and at the moment we are compiling it. And in the next we'll conduct the data analysis. And before we carry out our policy and recommendations, we'll carry out also a validation workshop. The validation workshop will give us also an input on what we have analyzed and what we have collected from our stakeholders. By the way, we are carrying out this data collection. The first plan was using point-by-point interview or data collecting, physical paperwork. Still, we are carrying out house to house or from on the transport spots, but to minimize the after the coronavirus, to minimize the interaction, we develop on a digital, either using mobile or smartphones or Android apps and tablets for data, but with enumerators contacting the person without paperwork. And at the end, we have also the research uptake and dissemination mechanism through conferences and workshops is one of the major creating awareness, communication mechanism, as well as disseminating information, and both sides collecting their view, as well as promoting what inclusive transport means. We have already in our in the publication part, we develop also brochures, banners, posters during the data collection, during the workshop, the initial workshop or consultation workshop. Those posters and banners have been developed, and towards the end of the result, we are planning also to provide some journal papers and conference papers. And as part of the research uptake and outreach, we have also capacity building, seminar and training in the area, or in relation to our research output. We are planning to communicate to the population at large through mass medias, local radios, televisions, as well as social medias, and we'll provide also some policy briefs at the end. Thank you very much. I think.
Thank you very much, Alem, and thank you very much for that contribution, highlighting the need that we need research on urban transport. We need research on secondary cities and smaller cities away from the capital city. We need also research not only on mobility, but personal security and harassment, and we also need understanding the employment patterns, the gendered employment patterns within the urban transport sector as well. So this is making a whole series of very important contributions. So now this opportunity for all of the those of you listening to ask questions through the chat box, and our panel will be available to be able to answer those. Hopefully you've been doing that as you've been listening, but there's the opportunity to do that, and we will take those questions now, and then we will finish our session.
Thank you very much, Jeff Turner. This is a technical advisor for High Volume Transport and Applied Research Program. That was a very, very informative session. And we had our panelists, Dr. Bernard Obika, Team Leader HVT, Eva Mwai, the North Star Alliance, Elem Gena Araya, I hope I've gotten that right, Alem Gena Araya, Alert Engineering, and Paul Curtis, Vectors Power Project. A lot of you saying good morning, just from the feedback and some of the questions you're getting. Jennifer from Uganda says, good morning, brothers and sisters. Good morning to you, Jennifer. Amin, thank you kindly. In green gratitude from Green Cub, this is Cape Town. Thank you so much for tuning in. Somebody else says, Alem Gena again says she joined late due to power issues, and she's from Ethiopia. Thank you very, very much. Because you're running behind time, we'll take a very quick 10 minutes break and then resume with our program. Remember to fill out the survey that is going to pop up on the screen next to you, on your screen right now. It's just a little, take a few minutes to kindly do that for us, and we'll really, really appreciate it. So see you in about 10 minutes.